So my name's Lily Ray. I'm the VP of SEO Strategy and Research, and I work at an agency called AMSIV in New York City. Been doing SEO for 15 years, very focused on news and publisher and affiliate websites in the last several years. And I'm here to talk about all things SEO and AI.
Well, Lily, thank you so much for the keynote presentation. It was fascinating. There was loads of great insight and practical tips, actually, for a lot of the audience members to take away from the session. So,
thank you.
Real highlight, personally, I think, from the conference. You've obviously been looking at the search products, the algorithm updates over that time a lot. You kind of detailed a lot of that in the presentation itself. I wanted to get your view on and maybe SEOs don't think about it this way anymore because it's just their business, but one company holding such sway, right, over the categorization and dissemination of information for users, how do you guys feel about that? Is that a problem, or does it make things kind of simpler in a way because it's, all in largely in one kind of platform, as it were?
I think the general sentiment has changed and evolved over the years, myself included, my perspective on it. One thing that makes it kind of easier is that we're all pretty focused on doing SEO for Google, because Google is about 90% of the world's market share for search engine usage, which means any rules and policies that Google puts out, we are following to a T all the time. Bing tends to actually follow in Google's footsteps in many cases. So often when we're doing SEO for Google, we're kind of doing SEO for Bing and other search engines simultaneously. But in that sense, it's made it easier to kind of, instead of saying we have to do one thing for Google and one thing for a different search engine. But to your point, I think many of our perspectives have changed over the last few years because we often feel like a lot of the ways that Google is changing and evolving are not fair to publishers, not fair for a lot of our clients, and there's not so much we can do. I would say a few years ago, it was easier to kind of have conversations with Google about challenges that we're facing and concerns that our clients have, but with the rise of generative AI, it's becoming trickier to have those conversations, and I feel like a lot of the times their communications teams can't even talk about some new AI features the way that they could with search results before. So there's a lot of frustration in our space right now.
Speaking about this very big milestone that you're celebrating, 15 years in the industry, in your presentation you showed, I think it was 7 different algorithm changes over that time. How do you stay motivated? Genuinely, we want to know, this is something that we combat in the affiliate industry too, of kind of getting a bit of whiplash with all of these changes, and Google is predominantly driving what you and your business is doing.
I started working on websites that were specifically hit by Google's algorithm updates. That became a really big part of where I specialize in the SEO space, I would say about 8 or 9 years ago. And because eventually when you're doing SEO tricks and tactics in a certain way, you get caught, you get penalized, and you never want to get penalized again. So that happened to me really early in my career, actually. In 2012 was the first time. And I said, I'm not going to do SEO in a way where I can get caught anymore. And I'm not going to recommend anything to my clients that I think can get them in trouble later on. It turns out there's a way to do SEO that actually abides by Google's guidance in such a way that you're really not setting yourself up for any risk there. But a lot of companies tend to find these tricks and ways of doing SEO where they say, I can get away with a lot right now and it's working really well in the short term, but then they get caught up with problems with Google. So what my team and I really focus on is playing the long game and doing SEO approaches that we know won't be penalized. It's impossible to predict in the future what's going to happen, but truly if you have this certain way of thinking about it where we say Google feels good about this, and we know for 25 years Google's kind of felt good about these approaches, those are the approaches that we use with our clients.
It's like algorithming the algorithm, essentially.
Just playing by the rules.
Playing by the rules. Who knew that?
It's not as fun. A lot of SEOs like to do the tricks. It's a lot more fun in the short term, but we don't do those tricks with our clients.
But it also saves you a lot of headaches, too.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because that was probably around a similar sort of time. What update would that have been that had
That was the Penguin update.
Okay, yeah, I think it was Panda for me. So I was working for a tiny affiliate website. We were a travel website with a suspicious title, but it was good for domain authority of having childfriendly.co.uk, family travel recommendations, that kind of thing. And literally overnight, I think it was Panda that kind of rolled out, and we just, plummeted. It was page 2, 3 for all these top ranking terms. And I was like, I need to go and get a proper job now. So, and that's why I work at Awin now. So in a weird way, it's kind of worked out for me, but it was definitely quite
for you, it was more of a demotivating experience.
Quite distressing, right?
We all go through that.
Exactly, You talked about how SEO has often faced a kind of reputational challenge, I think. It's interesting you mentioned that because affiliate marketing is an industry that has also faced a lot of scrutiny a lot of perception challenges around like its value.
Yeah.
And we've really struggled, I think, sometimes to kind of improve the reputation of the industry at large. And I wonder, is this something that SEOs actually think about collectively as an industry? Like, we need to try to bolster our reputation somehow.
There's a huge spectrum of approaches in the SEO industry. Historically, we've called it black hat and white hat.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we classify the different ways that people do SEO. There's also gray hat, which kind of falls somewhere in the middle. But those of us, let's say, that work on bigger brands, those of us that can't take those risks and we have to play the long game, we're very concerned about our reputation and very concerned about how we are thought about, especially when it comes to like decision makers and C-levels, because we need their buy-in to get SEO recommendations prioritized. So if they don't believe in what we're doing or they think that we are spammers, obviously that's not going to go very well.
Yeah.
But those of us that I believe are doing things right are essential to business operations. So it's very important for us, and this is why one of the reasons why I go speak at events so much is to say, like, the internet wouldn't function without us. People wouldn't be able to find anything on the internet without SEO. A lot of people don't understand how much SEO is involved in making content discoverable. It's not automatically discoverable. So there's a lot of work that we're doing that has nothing to do with spam. It has to do with how websites are set up. For example, right now, if you use a JavaScript-heavy website that uses what's called client-side rendering, you won't appear in ChatGPT in many cases at all. Your content won't appear. That's an SEO problem. So there's a lot of work that we're doing that's essential, again, for how the internet works. And a lot of us try to go out there and say, it's not all spam. We're really doing something that's necessary for business.
It's almost like, the positive perception is maybe it's the role of an archivist, somebody helping to organize that information so that it is accessible for the wider public.
Something that's come up a lot over the conference and that came up a lot during your keynote was AI and the use of LLMs. And you talked the attendees through some of the like shifting in strategic recommendations. I think you even called it AEO or GEO. Where do you see like the biggest shift being as far as creating website content for like traditional SEO value versus this now like AEO or
GEO
value?
It's a really big question and conversation in our space, unsurprisingly, with many different perspectives. So there's some people, especially people that have been doing SEO longer, who believe there's nothing fundamentally that changes because a lot of these large language models essentially use search engines to surface information. So if you're ranking prominently in search engines, you'll often find that you're cited heavily in large language models. But there's other people, and I think this is becoming kind of the truth in our industry, that believe that this is a new way of thinking about SEO because the nature of how people search in large language models is different, and the type of information and the type of answers that large language models are looking for is slightly different. So I talked about in my talk, for example, it seems like a lot of large language models are relying on user-generated content from sites like Reddit and LinkedIn and X and using that to answer questions. So this is relatively new, where it's like they're really leveraging what real people are talking about in large language model responses. And it's kind of a new way of thinking about SEO. So I think that we're discovering that there's, first of all, longer queries, more conversational queries that people are asking. When you go on Google for 20 years, you type best running shoes, right? But in ChatGPT, it might be a 20 or 30 word question about your specific needs. So that changes how we produce information to answer those questions.
Yeah.
From the analysis side of looking at the LLMs and how they are obviously connecting that information to what they display for a user, is that a different job that you're doing now? You mentioned obviously you're using tools like Profound and their platform. Like, is that a very different approach to what you would have historically done with more traditional search?
So that's what we're all really trying to learn right now because these tools are brand new. The tools that enable us to track answers in ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude, our team's had it for, let's say, about 6 weeks.
Okay, right.
So we're all trying to get to the bottom of like, is it really just SEO that fuels these responses, or is there some other way that large language models are citing information? And we are seeing that there's some new gaps. There's some new ways that they're answering questions, let's say, using websites that we wouldn't expect them to. So Google actually says in Google's AI overviews, we're citing more websites than we did before. If you think about how people traditionally used Google, they usually just click on the first or second or third result organically. But now with AI overviews, you might see that Google cites some company that never ranked on Google before. So now new companies are actually eligible to get more visibility with AI answers. So what we're doing as an industry right now is saying, why do those gaps exist, and how can we help answer questions, and where do we need to be answering questions in ways that we're being surfaced across all these different new platforms?
I thought it was particularly interesting too when showing some of the Profound data which LLMs prefer which specific websites. I think it's an incredible resource for marketers to understand, based on the tools that our own audience is using, like what are then these preferred sites essentially that we need to like start ranking in or appearing in, and how can we get there?
Yeah, that's been really interesting for us as well. And one challenge, with SEO in particular, is some of these companies that are heavily cited in large language models, like Wikipedia, for example, it's very difficult to influence the information there. The SEOs have tried for years to go in there and change things, and often you'll get shut down or it gets deleted, and that's by design. They don't want spam.
But that's why it's also an authoritative resource.
Exactly.
As well. It doesn't get gamed maybe in the same way.
Exactly. But we're also seeing on the other side, sites like Reddit and LinkedIn and Quora, which tend to be heavily cited because Google and large language models really are leaning into these real user conversations. There's a whole side of SEO that's learning how to spam these platforms. And the difference is that it used to be in Google's court to kind of create systems to nullify and demote spam tactics. Now, if they're elevating Reddit so prominently, it's Reddit's problem.
Right.
So now we have to look to these other companies to deal with their own content moderation. And that's, I think, a really big change in the space.
I think even seeing that like Microsoft Copilot continues to pull from Forbes as a high-ranking article for like B2B professionals and B2B marketers. They're like, well, that's how do I get in Forbes now if that's where Copilot is pulling their own tactics and resources from?
Were you surprised by that? You mentioned that when you're training almost the LLMs to obviously then deliver that information back into their interfaces, by how quickly they seem to respond to those updates. I think you said like 2-3 days sometimes. Like that's much, much quicker than we ordinarily see, right?
That's been really surprising to me, but also not surprising at the same time, because those of us that deal with basically bots and crawlers hitting our websites have seen a huge amount of crawl activity across all types of websites, coming from OpenAI's crawlers, coming from Google's Gemini crawlers. These chatbots are crawling and retrieving information from websites at a frequency that we've never seen before. So they seem really interested in getting up-to-date information. And that's obvious. If somebody's typing, where is the Awin conference and how do I get there? Which I literally typed into ChatGPT yesterday.
And it works. You're here.
And it worked.
It found brand new information, so it has to be able to answer those current questions people are asking.
I'll say it's very rare. I use ChatGPT quite frequently. It's very rare I ask it a question and it cannot find an answer.
Exactly.
So,
You touched on some of the big kind of the helpful content updates, the big updates that have come out of Google. Have you seen any examples of affiliate websites that have really managed to respond positively to those changes and have seen a resurgence in their traffic?
Sort of, yes. I included one slide in today's presentation about some of the companies that are being cited the most frequently. I believe it was like CNET, Tom's Guide, Wirecutter, companies that have, I would say, more robust review methodologies, which tends to perform really well in the SEO space. It seems like large language models are also kind of relying on the content from those websites, whether it's because the sites are ranking well in SEO or because they're starting to develop their own systems that say, we trust these publishers, we think they're doing the work to do real legitimate product reviews. We're seeing large language models citing those companies more so that their traffic might be a little bit less impacted.
It's a pretty existential challenge for the industry, right? We're talking about a completely new economic model potentially. Like if Google's trying to keep you on their website for longer or in their ecosystem for longer, and we're not getting the click-throughs to affiliate websites to then be able to kind of help guide shoppers to those eventual purchase decisions that they might make. That completely collapses that shopping funnel that we've traditionally seen affiliates play a role in. And I do wonder, like, and this is pretty speculative, but what's your take on like what this might mean for the industry?
Yeah, that's been probably the single biggest question that publishers and affiliates and everybody are asking to Google right now, because Google is rolling out these changes so quickly and aggressively. I think there will be a lot of pushback. We're already hearing a lot of pushback happening, but it's going to become more and more public. Like I'm speaking to a lot of journalists. A lot of journalists are becoming very interested in this. Publishers of all sizes are kind of banding together with these new challenges. And I think Google will have to respond. They're obviously moving extremely quickly right now. I think they're going to have to respond in a way where they say, we're introducing new ways to showcase individual creators, to showcase blogs and review sites, because I don't believe it's going to be the case that all consumers are comfortable saying, let's just only leave product reviews on Google, and we don't want to read anything from real influencers and reviewers the way that we have been forever. People like that type of content.
I think that was going to be my question is like, do you feel like Google sometimes is maybe losing sight of what the end consumer and end user actually wants at the benefit of themselves a bit here?
Yeah, I do think so. I think they have been kind of like cutting out the middleman and assuming that people will always just want to live on Google all the time.
Yeah.
And when you go and read the real sentiment in forums, in social media conversations, even in Google's own forums, when they launched AI overviews, every single comment on Google's own forums was, how do I turn this off? I don't want this. Right? So I think they're eventually going to have to listen. There's going to be so much momentum from the community about, we don't all want this. And they're going to have to make some changes in the future.
Fantastic.
Great.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.